one of my mentors, Bill Ray, was one of the remote viewers too, and actually helped run the program for a little while as well. This guy said that he had several encounters where he bumped into different types of entities. And one, he believes that the entity was angel that was guarding the ark, because that's what he found out later he was supposed to be looking into. There are people who have some sort of connection with these UAPs, and when they put their mind in a certain space, these UAPs come to either see what's up or, come because they called them. So this idea of psionics and using individuals to communicate and connect with these things have been around, and it seems like, that's just like the new hot term again.
Welcome back to the transmission, my friends. If you've been watching the channel as of late, you likely know we've been dipping into the wonderful, highly weird, but seemingly very real history of the U.S. military and intelligence agencies' interest in psi phenomena. And interest in is too light of a phrase. Extensive experimentation with remote viewing, precognition, and a number of other flavors of ESP. And as juicy and as fantastical as all of that lore is, my friends, it is easy to forget that the people involved in those programs are real people, and many of them are still out there and still even teaching remote viewing techniques. Our guest in this one, Hakim Isler, is acutely aware of this fact, as he has studied with not one of them, but multiple, including the great Joe McMoneagle, who we've mentioned a number of times on the channel at this point. But speaking of lore, that is far from all of the pertinent lore when it comes to Hakim Isler. He's got a stunning selection of novelty-soaked bullet points on his bio. To let just a few rip, Hakim is a former special ops soldier in the US Army. Specifically, he was trained in psyops. So this is somebody who really knows how to spot disinformation and psyops at an expert level. He's also a survivalist, and he's really just a seeker. I mean, he made it just abundantly clear in this conversation that he is really committed to understanding his consciousness, the nature of consciousness in general, and what it's capable of. He's also spearheading just a really intriguing event called Psi Games. The sort of elevator pitch is that it's the Psychic Olympics, but more specifically, it's a tournament that aims to really shine a light on and push the boundaries of psi phenomena, including things like remote viewing, psychokinesis, and other ESP capacities. I'm actually going to do my best to attend because I really want to see this in person for myself. For more info on that, go to psigamesinternational.com. A couple of quick wonder nuggets before we drop into this one. I had a pretty insane synchronicity when it comes to this whole remote viewing of the Ark of the Covenant tale. If you want to hear the story about that, I'm going to save it. I'm not going to tell it now. But go to the postscript, or stay tuned for the postscript of this mind meld if you want to hear that tale. Also, it felt appropriate in the spirit of this mind meld to conclude with something of a remote viewing challenge. If you would like to participate or just keep track of what's going on with that, stay tuned at the end. As usual, all of the portals for Hakim Isler and Third Eye Drops are in the description. Do stimulate that algorithm, my friends. Be sure you are subbed, comment, share if you would be so kind. Also, sub to Third Eye Drops wherever you listen to podcasts. We've got hundreds of episodes, many of them are audio only, with some truly brilliant humans. And I would deeply love to have you in the Wonder Lodge over at patreon.com/Third Eye Drops. There's going to be some news dropped over there fairly soon, but for now, we've got a patron-only Discord server. We've got a book club. We do Zoom hangs. You can get an array of awards depending on your pledge level. Would love to riff with you there, but currently, let's do so with Hakim Isler. Man, you are a trained PSYOP agent. You are somebody who's deeply informed and interested in the history of psi phenomena, both in the sort of classified intelligence agency aspects and personally. You're a trained remote viewer. You're doing this incredible Psi Games thing. So there's just so much to talk about, man.
Yeah, let's do it, man. I appreciate coming on the show, and any opportunity to be able to share some of this knowledge is a great opportunity. And so I thank you for that.
For sure. Yeah, just fresh on my mind because we briefly each brought up Monroe at the beginning before we were recording. And I remember hearing you say that you actually did Joe McMoneagle's remote viewing training, right? Um,
Yes,
yeah, I
I've
want to
done
hear more
both
about
of them.
that. Yeah.
That was fun. It was really fun. It was a bigger class than what I'm used to. So when I first started remote viewing, I started with a guy named Paul Smith, and Paul
Hmm.
Smith was also in a remote viewing program. And he keeps his classes small on purpose because it's a lot of information. So he runs it like you're going to a military school to learn this, and he learns it very much like the way he was taught by Ingo Swann. So um,
Oh.
you have a small class. You come in there, you have a bunch of work that you have to do and read, and you have to write essays and do all this stuff. Then you like learn about remote viewing, and then you actually do some remote viewings, and then you have like a crap ton of homework when you get home. So you got to go back to your hotel, and you got like about 2 hours worth of homework, and then the next morning you have to turn it in and then go through that. So that was like my experience, right? And then I go to the Monroe, and I go to Joe McMonagle's class, and it was a lot more laid back. It was a lot more people, so they had more people to deal with. They had some assistants, and their goal really was to have you understand that you are capable of remote viewing. Whereas Paul's goal was really to get you to be, it was like an intensive, like a master class. Like at the end of this, you're going to really understand these first few stages of what we call CRV. And so that was the difference between the dynamics, but it was just really cool to know that what's there. I also find that it's very important being in the presence of somebody like Joe McMoneagle and Paul Smith, because this kind of, there's some sort of resonance there where
Mm.
their energy of people who've done those things can, if you spend enough time around them, can kind of raise your vibration to that level in that particular space. Hence why we have like basketball camps and baseball camps,
Yeah.
and these really high level schools where it has the greatest minds, or and people want to get there because being around those individuals really helps you evolve a lot different. So that was really great for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and for people that don't know, you mentioned CRV, Ingo Swann. Let's get into the sort of, I guess, nerdy history of this to some degree, because I've been talking about it on the channel in some capacity. I want to keep talking about it because I think it is this period of American history that has the most to teach us about the depth of wisdom we already have, like in archives, in terms of psi phenomena and what the human mind and human consciousness seems to be capable of. Granted, depending who you ask, this is still controversial, but it doesn't seem like it's controversial to the intelligence agencies that were running, the DIA, the CIA. My God, man, like the volume of stuff, even that's just been declassified, let alone what we don't know about, really seems to indicate that not only is there something to this, but they used it to great effect over the course of decades. And
Yeah.
this guy you mentioned, Ingo Swann, he's part of this original cohort of remote viewers, like again, like these psychic spies that were able to do incredible things. In remote viewing, he seems like Ingo Swann was capable of doing a lot more than just remote viewing. Tell me more about Paul Smith, is that his name?
Yeah, Paul Smith.
Yeah, yeah, and how did he come into contact with Ingo Swann?
Oh, so yeah. So I want to backtrack too, and I want to
Yeah,
answer something about Ingo Swann. Ingo Swann, you know, when they were trying to figure out remote viewing and how it worked and come up with some sort of protocol, they would like have Ingo do stuff consistently the same way. And even though he proved that he could do it, and Ingo would just come out and be like, look, if I'm not a one trick pony, if you just want me to sit in here and look in a box, that's boring. Tell me to go find somebody somewhere,
yeah,
like give me a challenge. And that's really unique if you think about it. A lot of us, especially in our modern day and age, is like we're just, if we know something and people are praising us for it or giving us an opportunity to really explore it, we're like, okay, well, this is the thing I know. This is the thing I'm comfortable with. I'm not really sure about going down that other way because then I might make a mistake and people might talk bad about
Yeah.
me. But no, he was just the opposite. He was like, if I'm done playing games with this, like being in this room, looking in this box, like I want to go explore the galaxy and the world, like, and that's
Yeah.
like, I find that really amazing. And that's why his name is still on our lips to this day. If we look at any field, the people whose names tend to be on our lips and on our minds, even though hundreds of years or, whatever time span, that tend to be reoccurring names are the people who really were like that, who really pushed the envelope, who were like, I'm not comfortable with just being comfortable. I want to
Right.
go beyond. Right. And
Yeah.
so I just wanted to highlight that just to pay homage to Ingo and
For
the
sure.
amazing work he did
Yeah. Yeah.
by pushing himself, which gave us a lot more understanding of what we call now controlled remote viewing. Um,
Have you, sorry to cut you off, have you read
uh,
any of his books?
yeah, I have read some of Ingalls books. One in which is was instrumental in helping me move towards creating the Psi Games,
Oh, cool,
right?
cool.
And so he's got like psychic sexuality, and he's got penetration, and he's got
Which
like
are two different things.
yeah, two totally different things. He's got like the Secrets of Power 1 and 2. So those two actually were helping me with this, kept inspiring this thought about Psi Games over and over again. And so yeah, so I have read quite a few of his books, and I have some that I still need to read that I haven't.
Yeah, I haven't actually read any of his stuff. I would like to read more. Like I just told you I read this book Phenomena, and I'm just obsessed with it. And I know a lot of the core, cast of characters in this book all have their own work that they did over the course of decades. Many of them have their own books. Ingo Swann, Joe McMoneagle, uh, but oh yeah, like Hal Puthoff, and a lot of those the scientists involved too, I guess, have a whole body of work I need to look deeper into. But so anyway, Paul Smith, is he? His name sounds familiar. Was he involved in the military remote viewing?
Yeah, so Paul
Okay.
Smith was one of the military remote viewers. He got actually recruited and invited in by Tom McNair.
Mm,
Tom McNair went on to be, he got out pretty early on. He helped build it, but then got out pretty early on. And he went on to stay friends with Ingo and be one of Ingo's best students, even though he was no longer like doing it for the military. Tom McNair was. Paul Smith stayed into the military for, I think stayed in that program for about 10 years or so, 7 or 10 years. And he not only learned all the way up through stage 6, but then he also helped teach it as well. And so that's kind of his background into it. He was a creative mind. He was in the intelligence community. He ended up moving across the street from Skip Atwater and Tom McNair, and they actually approached him and asked him if he'd be interested in doing this thing that they couldn't really talk about. And he said, yeah. And then they kind of, read him in on the program, and then, gave him a test, and he did well, and off he went. So that was that.
cool. Are these 6 stages you're talking about? Is this part of so again, people who aren't into the history of this, there is a now declassified document that I believe was architected by Ingo Swann, right? That is like the declassified sort of manual for how you train remote viewing. Is this where the 6 stages are?
Yeah,
Okay.
so when you do remote viewing, controlled remote viewing, you go through these 6 stages, and those 6 stages basically, well, you go through you learn a few, you go through like 1 and 2 and 3, and then you move on and you go through like 4 and 5, and then you really dive into 6. Now there have been more stages that Tom McNair have been able to move towards. But you got two basic types of remote viewing. You have like structured and unstructured remote
Mm,
viewing, right? And so structured remote viewing would be like the CRV, where structure is everything. And part of the reason that structure is really important is because your brain wants to move towards the logic side more than it wants to move, especially as adults in American society, more than it wants to move towards the creative right brain, right? And
mhm.
so instead of fighting that consistently, which is something that we would do like with a lot of really deep meditation practice, you're not really fighting it, but you're just trying to put it in this place like, okay, you're great, but right now I need to shut you down, and I need to kind of go into this theta state and just kind of be more relaxed and more focused. um, So you're trying to do that, but then with the structure of remote viewing, what it does, or CRV, control remote viewing, what it's doing is it's keeping busy that left side of the brain,
Yeah.
so that your consciousness or the subconsciousness can start to go out there and reach out and get that information without a lot of overlay, or noise, we call it, from the left side of the brain. And so you're giving the left side of the brain something to do. Then also, for the analyst's sake, for the person who's going to be looking at your work afterwards, especially if you got 15 people doing a remote viewing on one thing, if we all have a different structure on how we write stuff down and how we put stuff down, that becomes pretty daunting, right?
Right.
So when we were in high school, we all learned how to put our name and then the date and then the place, and then we write our thing, and that had to be on one side, and we learned that method, and that helps the teacher. So now teacher is able to go to the same place over and over again, and that speeds up their job when it comes down to grading your papers. But if we had every 20 people in the class and everyone wrote things differently, some people started on the back, some people started in the middle, some people started over here, some people put their name, some people didn't put their name, it creates chaos for an analyst, who's trying to look at your work. So that's where the structure really finds its power. It finds its power with occupying the left side of the brain, and then also giving you an opportunity to really focus on the right side of the brain and pulling in that information. Then it gives you a place to really not have to think about where that information needs to go.
Yeah.
You already kind of know, you know where the information needs to go. So you don't have one color over here and then another color, one color on the left side of the page, another color on the right side of the page, and then like some words in between, and then another color at the bottom, which again is a nightmare when you're trying to do some information, when you're trying to actually use this effectively for information gathering or intel. So that gives you that. And then the stages are just broken down, because instead of you having to think about everything at once, again, you take it in phases. You have this method of doing this that allows you to put the information down in a very clean and concise way, and everything has its place. It's a lot more organized that way. For us creative types like myself, if you come into my office, there's books everywhere, there's papers everywhere, and it does frustrate me sometimes if I have to find something and I can't remember what I did with it. I'm
Of
like,
course, yeah. I'm the same way. I'm the same
yeah.
way. Yeah.
And I'm like, and then I meet people who love having everything in files. And, I went to Hal Puthoff's house not too long ago, and I had asked him, he was telling me about something, and he was like, oh, I think I have a copy of that.
Yeah.
And he gets like goes into his office, and like he's got stuff, I mean, more papers than we could ever imagine, but everything's filed. So he was like, oh, it's right here. Boom, boom, boom. Pulls it out. And it was like, I was like, when's the last time you touched that document? Like 15, 20 years ago,
Wow.
But he knew exactly where it was because it was organized. It was structured. Right.
Yeah.
And so structure does have a place, and they have this saying, if you can see that, structure, content be damned. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
And that's Rob Cowart. He was a guy in the remote viewing program, but he was talking about how important, if you have content, that's great, but if it's everywhere, it just becomes a cipher, like it's a code,
Right.
that nobody can read but you. But if you have structure to it, then it actually becomes something that we can all share and grow from.
That's my eternal battle, man. Is like I am not I am not a type A personality. I am not an organized type personality. I'm a way more like you were alluding to, a way more sort of creative, on the fly type of person. We gotta stop and zoom in on Hal Puthoff though, because he to me is one of the most interesting, compelling figures that's been involved in this since the very beginning. So for
Yeah,
people
man.
that don't know of Hal Puthoff, he was a physicist at SRI, which was the contractor who did a lot of this research throughout decades. So he helped design, analyze, did so many things having to do with this remote viewing program, Project Stargate and all of the other sub projects under that umbrella. Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ were sort of at the core of all of this stuff, at least the stuff that's declassified. And man, I would have to think that if somebody knows some crazy shit, Hal Puthoff knows some crazy shit. I mean, not only was he doing that since the early 70s, he has now and you might know more about this than me, but I know that at his lab in the Austin area now, he's still a contractor who analyzes anomalous things for the government. Like if you go to his they talk about this in the book Phenomenon, but if you go to the website of his organization and you go to the sort of like headings of what they look at, it's very mysterious and general, but it's enough to be like, what? It's
Yeah.
like a astro astro astroarchaeology and like exotic propulsion and other I think psi stuff, and it's just like, well, one, who are you exactly advertising to on this, and two, what does that practically mean? um and for being he's deep into his 80s, right?
Yes. Yeah,
But
I
he
believe he's
seems
like
like
88 right now. Yeah.
he's totally with it though, in the most recent thing I saw at least.
Yeah, yeah, he's 100%, 100%, and that's kind of weird. It reminds me of the movie Highlander,
Oh yeah, yeah.
or the series even, whereas like over time people started discovering his photo in like a
Mhm.
picture of this guy and like all these different, he was a doctor and then he's a lawyer and then he's got this
Yeah.
connect, and they're like, who is this guy, how long has he been around? If you read that book, like you were saying, the one that you're reading now and that I've read, Phenomenon, his name pops up like a
Yeah.
bunch. And even in Diane Powell's book, ESP Enigma, his
Yeah.
name pops up again in a bunch of different projects.
Yeah.
And then now you got these two movies out. One is called The Program by James Fox, and now you have The Age of Disclosure. Yeah, the stuff that this guy has been involved in and that he knows is just like you can't even imagine, And so I don't even know. It's keeping him young. It's
Yeah.
keeping him going
Yeah.
because
I
he's
would love
88 and
to.
he's still sharp as a tack, man.
I would love to talk to him at some point. What was the occasion of you hanging with him?
I was just there as a fly on the wall. Some friends are working on a project with him, and then this was an opportunity. And I actually work with those friends, so it was there. But they had some specific stuff that they were working with him on, and I was just kind of there. I asked some questions about his thoughts about the Psi Games and things of that nature. So um, that would be the extent of what I had going on there.
Cool.
So.
So as somebody who's been, is a practitioner and is actively interested in this stuff, not just historically, but like I said, as a practitioner, and also someone who is in the military, when you read Phenomena and you see, okay, all of this research is cut off in like 95 or whatever, when some of it comes to light, do you buy that? And plus now we're both aware of
Yeah.
like the current whistleblower environment with Jake Barber coming out, his insistence that there are these psionic assets that have been being used by the military. Um, what do you think really happened there? Do you think it went deeper, darker? They changed all the vernacular around it. Do you think they really stopped it and then other agencies picked up the mantle? Like what's your theory on that?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and the reality is that normally when things work really well, we don't just stop doing them, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so we just look at it from that logic side. Now, people claim that it wasn't enough, but they ran this thing for 20 years, and even if you look at the final nail per se in the coffin when they had Jessica Utz, who is a statistician, and the guy who was like the amazing Randy's right hand man, or he was a protege.
Yeah.
And they had them both look into this. That guy came back and was like, yeah, I think I don't believe it, but the research was done well. Right. And so he still was kind of being a skeptic, even though he couldn't find a hole in what was going on. Um, and then not Annie Jacobs, Jessica Utz was like, yeah, statistically, this thing is real. So
Yeah.
like, and she was one of the top statisticians in the world at the time. So, but it came over, and as soon as the CIA got it, before that paper was even, they had these two individuals look into it, and before, it's the way I understand it, before that was even published, or before it even came to the CIA got the program, the remote viewing program, from the DIA, I believe, and they shut it down. And then the paper came out. So they were like already just ready to shut it down.
Okay.
Now, if you follow this really well, and I don't feel any type of way anymore, like, this person is my friend, so I didn't want to break any confidence. But there's a gentleman named Skip Atwater, and he recently said on a podcast or in a YouTube interview that there were 5 other programs. Now, I already remembered that, or there were 5 programs total that, based on his clearances, he knew about, that other people would not have known about, right? Who were even in the remote viewing program. So in the Army's remote viewing program. So he was like, there were 5, So then what happened to those 5? We only know about 1. We know about the Army's program, but we pretty certain that the NSA had a program, and then there's other organizations that probably have programs going on. What I would stray to say is what Russell Targ said recently in one of his interviews, was that one of the things, the common issues that they had about remote viewing, is that they couldn't stop it. They couldn't figure out a way to stop it. So if they couldn't stop it, and other governments couldn't stop it, then what you have is that you have this kind of wide open gap where anybody can just come in. If they believe in the techniques and they practice the techniques, they can go in and take secrets or find secret information. And you, as a government who is in the business of secret information, couldn't stop it. A matter of fact, I think it was Pat Price or Ingo Swann. One of them said that it was Pat Price. The more you try to hide something, the more it becomes visible and appealing in the psychic space.
Ooh,
right?
Interesting.
So now we have all these secrets of people with these clearances trying to hide stuff. No, in the psychic space, this stuff is exposed. It's out there. It's ready to be known. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
So now, as a government or an organization, what do you think would be the only way? Well, okay, so you're telling me I can't physically, or I can't mentally or psychically stop people from getting all my secrets. So, okay, well, I guess the only thing we can do is provide some sort of misinformation campaign or create some psyops so that I could get these people to not stop doing it, stop believing that this is really working. And we've already given them all of this data that shows that it does work. So now we need to come up with contraindicated data, or data that says that it doesn't work. So now I think that would be a logical way for it to go, is that way. So to answer your question, I think, it makes sense that it would still be going on somewhere in the organization. And China and Russia spent a lot of money, and they had some we know, based on data, based on research, based on information that's come out, they had very successful kids and adults that could do all types of things with psychic abilities. So you just got to ask yourself, just put it in your shoes. Just say, hey, I'm at my house, or I'm in this field of teaching kids martial arts, right? And I recognize that there's this thing that works for people when it comes down to marketing my business. But it could be questionable as to whether it's it's a good thing to do, right? So maybe I just not say I'm doing it, but do it anyway. Right.
Right.
But I don't want to be out there. I wouldn't tell anybody that, openly, but I'm going to do it anyway behind closed doors, because it's valuable and it's going to help me be successful. So I think people can relate to it when they put themselves in those shoes, versus just looking at this big government. Unless you just don't want to believe it, everybody's threshold is different. So some people just don't want to believe that. And I think the religious organizations did the same thing. Oh, wait a minute. Should we be out here telling everybody they have these type of abilities and powers? Or because that's going to make it really tough to find followers and control. Now, I haven't done this research, and so I will say that, but I'm confident that it's true, but I haven't delved into it as deeply as I've delved into other topics. So I could be incorrect. So I'll just put that caveat on it. There's conversation, there's some information that's out that says that at one point, a certain religious group that we know actually did believe in reincarnation. But
Hmm.
then they started saying to themselves, well, if people think they can keep coming back over and over again, then they're not going to have the urgency
Right.
to choose our deity or our God
Right.
as the
Yeah.
main God, and then us as priests as a conduit for that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and a lot of people don't know that if you go far enough back in history, let's just call it Christianity because that's the most obvious example of what you're saying. Like there is no
Mhm,
doctrine of reincarnation in Christianity, or at least most kinds of Christianity.
mhm,
But if you go far enough back into Greek philosophy, this idea of metempsychosis or reincarnation is all over the place. Plato
yeah,
talks about it, all the pre-Socratic philosophers talk about it. Um, so this was a widely believed thing, not just in the Eastern world and Eastern spirituality, but also
mhm.
in Western philosophy and esoteric traditions. So yeah, it is suspicious how that just sort of falls off the doctrinal map. And but before I forget, I wanted to share that one anecdote from Phenomena to just illustrate how seriously they took the threat of remote viewing. There's that whole episode where they're having a meeting with some general, and he's worried about remote viewers being able to see where they're hiding the nuclear warheads.
Mhm.
um and he gets visibly angry apparently in this meeting and is like, so what you're telling me is they can find where they are? That's what you're telling me, our enemies remote viewers can find where they are? And they're just kind of like, yeah, we can't guarantee that that's not a distinct possibility. So then they create this whole insane underground network of tunnels. I think they say millions of square miles
Yeah.
underground in Nevada, with the express purpose of shuffling around dummy nuclear warheads and real nuclear warheads on the chance that remote viewers might be able to see where the warheads are. They create this whole crazy underground complex so they can move the warheads around. It's nuts. It's nuts, the lengths that our government has gone to and these other governments have gone to. I don't think most people, even if they know this exists, I don't think they appreciate the insane amounts of effort that have been put into all this stuff. It's crazy.
And it was either, so then to follow up that story, from what I understand, they actually created that shell game with these
Yeah.
missiles, and then they had remote viewers try to find them, and they did find them. And so then
Perfect.
that
Yeah.
general got even more mad because that was his baby,
Yeah.
and he didn't believe in all this remote viewing business. So he, from what I understand, was another catalyst, another nail in the coffin for the remote viewing program, not because it didn't work, but because it made him look bad. And he spent
Mm.
all this money. And that was like his pet thing. That was his baby. And so the idea that these woo woo people can come out of nowhere and then, take this really well thought out idea with millions and millions of dollars behind it and just kind of shut it down was not okay with him. And
Yeah.
so he was very instrumental in demonizing this kind of program. And so yeah, that guy went to great lengths to really shut things or put a nail in that coffin for remote viewing.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's this whole other added angle now of the psionic program in air quotes. And side note, I always wonder if that word is just a sort of agnostic word that they're using publicly to hide whatever the real terminology is, because that's one of the things when you read a book like Phenomena, or you look into any of these declassified documents, they're always kind of subtly changing the language, or
Yeah.
they're inventing new words, like man, I'm actually drawing a blank on some of them now, but yeah, they're rarely just overtly using the words, psychic, or telekinesis, or psychokinesis, or
Hmm.
whatever. They're making up terminology so that it's more esoteric and harder to find.
Hmm.
Um, So I have to wonder, what is like there's got to be some language lurking underneath psionic. But anyway, if we just go with this, now agnostic, publicly used term of psionic, this is adding a whole new layer to this. It's not just, remote viewing and precognition, psychokinesis. It's using those abilities to contact something else or summon something else. And I would I'm dying to know like where this comes from. Like when they figured this out, how they figured it out. Um you know, again, assuming that this is legit, but
Yeah.
w- did you have any inkling of this existing before the barber stuff came to light, or was that sort of a
So,
revelation to you too?
yeah, that's a great question. So psionics, the term is actually an old term. It goes
Yeah.
back to like 1950s. Some people even speculate 1930s. And the idea, and then it became like a Dungeons and Dragons like gaming term, and then it kind of took back its normal scientific or parapsychology terminology again. And so that has been around, but the idea of basically the way it sounds is it's more in line with what the remote viewing program started coming up with, which is this idea of remote influence, right?
Mm,
And so people like Lim Buchanan, who's also a part of the remote viewing program, who back in the day, who was also a part of that, he teaches and talks about remote influence and this idea that you can influence people remotely at a distance. In that book Phenomenon, Anna Jacobs talks about it as well.
yeah.
The idea of being able to heal people and deal with different types of aspects of people's body system remotely, and the research that they've done there. And so this has kind of been a thing, but not necessarily with extraterrestrials or these NHIs or whatever you would call these different beings and their craft, these UAPs. However, there has been research and studies out there that talk about people having these type of connections where these beings or these UAPs seem to be coming back to them over and over again. And what is the connection
Right.
there? And with a friend of mine, Chris Bledsoe, when they started doing a lot of research on him, they started saying, or at least it came out in his book UFO of God, that Jim Semivant, which is a CIA guy, really
Hmm.
high level CIA individual, was saying that what they know, or alluded to, I believe in the book, what they know is that there are people who have some sort of temporal or some sort of connection with these UAPs, and when they put their mind in a certain space, these UAPs come to either see what's up, or come because they called them, or nobody really knows what that relationship is. Like,
Yeah.
is it a moth to a flame type thing where it just becomes interesting? Like, what's going on over here? This guy all of a sudden is shining brighter than everybody else. Let
Hmm.
me go see
Hmm.
what's going on there, so I can gather data on what levels these people are able to accomplish.
Yeah.
Or is it really that you're just calling that those beings? And again, if there are multiple different types of beings, then some of them may be interested in things for different reasons, right? And so we don't know what that is neither. So this idea of psionics and using individuals to communicate and connect with these things have been around, and it seems like that's just like the new hot term again, because it
Yeah.
was brought up in this particular context with this particular gentleman who was divulging a lot of really interesting, important information. And so now we have a government or ex-government official or individual that's coming forward and saying, yes, this is real. This is what we were doing. And here's a term so that it can help you guys wrap your head around it, which I find maybe this is what we're seeing is a soft disclosure as
Yeah.
all of these terms are coming out and giving people things that they can hold on to now, and it's not it's becoming a little bit more concrete now.
Yeah. It seems like that's what's going on to me. If the whole thing isn't just some massive psyop for some unbelievably complex network of reasons. I feel because there's no one explanation that I can think of that would justify any kind of like really, really long term psyop like this. I feel like it would have to be a very long narrative shifting con game or something like that. But I'm more warm to the idea of what you're suggesting, that this is like a gradual, slow roll disclosure. And there are various aspects of that disclosure that they're identifying. And they're probably like, all right, how are we going to bring up this idea that we're already constantly probably in contact with other life forms or archetypes, or to use Robert Monroe's term, energy systems, or like
Yeah.
whatever you want to call them, beings, I don't know. Well, let's throw this out there. Let's throw out this idea of psionic contact with benevolent. And that's the other thing that's really interesting about Barber's story is he really pushes this idea that it is benevolent, that no matter what you hear, scary stories about abduction, scary stories about, things wanting to feed on you or take you over or experiment on you. No, that is not what these things are. They're of a spiritual nature. They're benevolent. Chris Bledsoe, who you brought up, says the same thing. But there's a lot of people who have, who are like, okay, well, what about all these anomalous injuries? What about the radiation,
Yeah. Yeah.
damage that people are suffering? What about all of those stories of abduction? What about cattle mutilation? There's so many following questions, and of course, I don't think we know the answers to those questions. But yeah, I have to agree that it's probably, I think, the most parsimonious thing, if it is real, is that it's got to be some kind of slow roll
Yeah.
disclosure. And
Yeah, well,
yeah,
I would offer this too, and let's game this out a little bit. So if you want to avoid catastrophic disclosure
yeah,
of an entity or entities that exist out there, where would you have the most success to do that? Telling people that that some of the entities, and harping on some of the entities being, you know, evil and mean and ready to kill you and do all this stuff, or say that they're good.
yeah,
so so I would say, yeah, hey, we know about these other ones that are bad, but let's just talk about the good ones, because we are trying to do this gradual disclosure. And if we just start saying, yeah, they're bad, they're bad, they're bad, then when they do unveil themselves, I mean, that's when all hell is going to break loose. But if we say they're good, they're good, they're good, and then they unveil themselves and they're good, and then and the people won't freak out as much.
yeah,
Does that make sense?
totally, yeah,
So that's what I would say as well, because I think, what we do know, and I don't know if we can say, I mean, we could always say if they exist, because there's still all these different motives of why people are doing that. But I think it's pretty clear now that they're coming out saying, yes, they're there. You got Colonel Carl Nell, who just came out straight out and said, hey, look,
yeah,
they're here.
Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing. And there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that. There's zero doubt.
They're interacting on age of disclosure. From what I understand, you have multiple people from multiple different governments, high level individuals saying, yes, they're here. Now, they're not going into detail, from what I understand, as to why they're here or whether they're good or bad. And, some people have had good encounters, some people have had bad encounters. I would also offer up, for balance, one of my mentors, Bill Ray. And Bill was one of the remote viewers too, and actually helped run the program for a little while as well. And went on to have a very, very, very long intelligence and counterintelligence career, where he didn't retire until he was like in his 80s. So this guy said that he had several encounters where he bumped into these different types of entities. And one, he believes that the entity was angel or cherubim that was guarding the ark, because that's what he
Whoa.
found out later he was supposed to be looking into. And others, he was at the ship that he went to. He was remote viewing this site where a bunch of people disappeared from the ship, and he started having feelings of these people being in panic, and they were dealing with something that was very dark and evil, so much to the point where even when he explains it, he says the visceral response that he gets is just still overwhelming and unsettling, just talking about it.
Hmm.
And so one of the things he left me with was he said that he's worked with double agents, or he's worked with undercover agents that he was running, or assets, he would call them, when he was working for these different governmental agencies. And he's had instances where he's a spy, he knows these other people are spies, and they're working for him, he's using them as assets, and they've been so convincing, even to him, that they were really working for just him and giving him information. And then he finds out they're a double agent, right? He says, so if I'm this super trained guy, trained in all of the techniques to spot this type of stuff, and somebody can still fool me, how are we to think that some entity on some other level can't do the same thing?
Right.
So I said, well, what would you say? Would you say people should take this and go out there and like try to explore these entities? And he said, no, run the other way. And I said, what? He's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, they could be good, but they could be tricking you. And they could be using, I mean, we could do it on a base level. Chris Ramsey, you know, the average person is really easy to fool.
Yeah.
And it's our desire to say we know better, that we are better, that we can't be fooled, that actually makes us even more foolable, right? That was the same tactic we used in Psyop. Those who know are the easiest to go after, because you wrap everything in their knowing, and then they'll just eat it up, right? Mm-hmm. So us on this little small base level, we're saying we can do that. Then imagine what some entity that knows about the galaxy and all this stuff about consciousness could do to us, and how they would be able to fool us, you know? So I think that was a very fair assessment. Not saying that I agree with it 100%, but I think that's a very fair assessment, is that yes, you can believe what you want and feel what you want and say, for me, it was true, pure love and energy. But also, maybe we should stay open to the possibility that that could be a trick.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that it's such a hall of mirrors. But I think for people like myself, and I would venture, just based on what I know about you, people like you who have this, you know, we have this seeking disposition. You're a martial artist. You're a soldier. I grew up doing martial arts. You know, I'm sure you're very drawn to the hero's journey motif. I am too. It's like, just because there's fear there doesn't mean I don't want to investigate it. Like, I still want to go into that like dark forest and poke around and see what's there and see what's real. Maybe I don't need to go into the deepest, darkest, you know, cave that's the most brimming with goblins or anything, but I want to get a look. I want to see what's going on, to some degree, you know, and that's led me down a multitude of paths of exploring different things in my own life, and obviously it has for you too. So I'm assuming that you still encourage people to investigate these qualities, these capacities, these realms. I mean, you must, because it's part of your living. It's you're doing Psi Games. You're teaching people some of these techniques.
Well, I think we could hide from it and let it, you know, there's things happening to you and you happening to it, right? And so when things happen to you, you have very little control over how, you know, you have control over how you respond, but you don't have a lot of control over how it happens to you. When you happen to it, you not only have control on how you respond, but you also have a little bit more control on how you engage. And so I think it's fair, and I think it's a balanced way to come at it, to say, well, okay, instead of me hiding from this thing that is there and could just start popping up in my life, and then me being motivated to try to figure it out, which means that I'm reactive, and that never really works well. It's always really good to be proactive, and then hope for the best, and, you know, plan for the worst, hope for the best, right? In my opinion. And so I always think this idea of saying, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do this in a responsible way. I'm going to find somebody I feel is a good mentor, I'm not a high proponent of like, oh, I just need to meditate and I'll tap in and I can, and I am the guru. I've just got to awaken the guru within me, like, yeah, I believe that there's this ability and these powers there, but I think mentorship is just like really important because there are elders and they've gone through some stuff and they've had experiences. Now, that doesn't mean that all of their experience is going to relate to ours, right? Because you could be the one that breaks the mold. I tell people that all the time when they ask me business advice. I say, well, look, this didn't work for me, but I can't say that won't work for you because you could be the guy that changes everything, or the girl that changes everything. So I'm open to say like, hey, here's what happened, but try it out. So I am open to it. I feel that that's one of the reasons for the Psi Games. The Psi Games is like, hey, if we have these abilities, we need to push them forward. We need to grow them. And up to this point, the only person who's really the only place that's put real money and research behind this and doing it on a real basis is these governmental agencies. I don't know if the government is always has the best interests of the people all the time in these different organizations. So maybe we should have a citizen version of this as well, where we actually try to raise up our abilities so that we can also engage and we can have conversations at the table, right? Because the government is supposed to be for the people, and it's supposed to be a representation for the people, but we also want to have the people be a representation for the people on some level. So the Psi Games is like, hey, if people are bumping into these entities and people have these abilities, let's put it on the world stage where we could build a strong, positive community around this. We can collaborate. We could have people who have different experiences and different strengths collaborate with each other to help raise up all ships and not just my little group in my little corner of the world. And then we can find mentorship. And then lastly, we need to bring up the next generation in a world where they don't feel like they have to shut down their gifts, and then they can reclaim the years that they've shut down their gifts. So if you think about and you've probably seen this too in the circles that you go into, when we go to Monroe or all these different places, the majority of the people there are in their 40s, 50s, coming to these things. Yeah. And when you talk to them, well, how did you get started? Oh, yeah, when I was a kid, I used to be able to see things and talk to things, and I had all these experiences. But then parents, society, community said, nope, that's not something we do, and that's not real, or that's evil, or whatever thing came up. Yeah. And then they shut it down. And then at some point they go years and years and years, and then they meet somebody or have an experience and they say, oh yeah, that's right. When I was a kid, I used to do that. Let me start now as an adult investigating this more. What would our society be like if people from that age of 10, when they had that first experience, was supported, given love, shown mentorship, given mentorship. Yeah. And now they grow up for 10, 20, 30 years of just practicing and believing in this ability. Where would we be now? What would that be like? And so the Psi Games is like, okay, how do we get more of that? How do we make a place that's fun for these children to go to? And part of that is meeting them where they at. They like to play. They like fun. Yeah. So let's meet them where they have fun, and let's just grow from there, and let's do that for adults too. And now we can also inspire each other. We can push each other to new levels. Our friend Chris, another friend of ours, this guy named Nelson, believes in this idea of, he's a memory champion, a 6-time world memory champion, or a U.S. memory champion. And he talks about how when the memory, there was a time that science thought that you can only hold about 6 to 9 things in your head at one time, right? And that was it. That was like the cap. But now they're up to like 500. The champion can hold 500 different numbers or items in their head and recite them in order to you at a time. Right? And so that happened through competition. He said the same with cards. They used to say you have 5 minutes to remember 12 playing cards in an order that we choose. And that was the top. Nobody could beat that. He said then it turned into 12 seconds to memorize the full deck.
Wow.
And just recently, last year, he said that a young kid, was able to memorize a full deck in any order that you put it in 7 seconds.
That's insane. Oh my God, man.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The kid has already memorized the whole deck of cards.
Do they just like go through
Probably.
the cards like
I don't even know how they do it,
That's
but I was
wild.
just like, that's insane. But how did that happen? That happened through competition, people getting together and, pushing each other.
Yeah.
Or a new word I heard recently, co-opetition. Yeah, it's like cooperation, competition together, where we're still working for the same goal, but we're pushing each other through this inspirational way. So that's really what the Psi Games is, and that's what we're all about. Is like, hey, how do we get people to spend more time in consciousness? How do we make room for youth to kind of grow up with this? How do we get more people to collaborate and come together and build a community around this that supports one another? Take it out of the lab where, labs is great. A lab is great, but, that it's only but so far you can get there. And then you're going to publish another paper that nobody's going to read.
Right. And that people who are skeptical are going to say like, no, this is pseudoscience.
Exactly.
This is nonsense. Yeah. I mean, obviously I respect the scientific method and think it's unbelievably important, and it has rewarded us in so many ways. I don't want to straw man it, but we got to remember the scientific method is something that human beings invented to try to get repeatable results and ascertain things about reality. It doesn't in and of itself determine what is real, right?
Yeah.
Like, and there's so many parts of life that are not capturable, by the scientific method. Any kind of qualitative, to use the philosophy of consciousness term, like qualia based experience, none of that can really be captured by the scientific method. And I think these abilities are so endemically tied up in those qualitative kinds of knowing that how you even try to capture that just in statistics it's not satisfactory, and going back to a lot of the justification that they used to shut these programs down, a lot of it had to do with like, well, yeah, this might be impressive, but it's not repeatable. Like this one occasion, maybe that really yielded results, but it's not, you can't like put it in a lab and repeat it. And it's like, yeah, well, you don't need to do that to prove that there's something there. Like if you have a crazy experience or I have a crazy experience, I know that happened. Like I don't need some scientist to be like, hold on, buddy, you didn't like, so I think, yeah, this idea of fostering this positive environment, this friendly environment where we're all hanging out and riffing and exploring and like seeing what's possible, that's super exciting, man. It's almost crazy to me that hasn't happened before, that there hasn't been something like this, or maybe like back in the day in like the like Esselin's heyday or something, maybe they did things like this, but yeah, I've never heard of anything.
Yeah, I know just to give credit where credit is due, that and I found this out after I've already embarked on the Psi Games. I started talking to John Cruz, who runs the Rhine Research Center, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, we do something like a small thing called the Psi Games, and it's only like 20 of us. We get together and we'll play this thing." So it actually existed out there, and I didn't even know that. But then it wasn't on this scale. And this is it's called Psi Games International, because I'm trying to bring people from all over the world together under this banner, under us being able to really explore this and build a multi-nation community where people can train and feel comfortable exploring these different realms and these different avenues. So that's really the key right there. And so hopefully we get people that support it and that want to try. And sometimes people have a bad idea or feeling about competition. They say, oh, it's negative. And I think that's really just our culture. We go to the kids' football game and we see dad over on the sideline cursing at everybody and like, telling this kid he better like score 20 touchdowns for that day. Versus, like, hey, it's all right, just have fun play with your friends, do the best that you can, and so on and so forth. And this way, if we build this community in love and respect and inspiration and community and collaboration, I think that's going to be a different environment. So I've been offering this on every channel that I've talked to. I say, hey, look, if you feel like competition's not the way to go and it should be done in love, then get off your ass and bring the love to the show.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's a good way to put it.
Don't just talk, be a keyboard warrior.
Right.
Recognize what we're trying to do is, again, community, collaboration, inspiration. And then if you could stand behind those, then come out and support and be the change you want to see. Be the person that helps add that extra light to the room. And I made some friends laugh recently. I said, be a care bear, because care, let's join hands in the room and let that heart shine, so don't just talk about it from a distance. Come and help us out. Come and help us make a new world. Because it's really funny. If you look at all of the things that are happening right now, we are setting the world up to be not worldly, but cosmically. We're now talking about UAPs. We're now talking about NHIs. Well, we're now talking about flying to the moon and building things on the moon. And that's becoming more of a reality, or Mars. That's becoming more of a reality. And then it's well, how do you make that happen? Well, we got to have currency. We can't just fly dollars all around the place.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, what about a digital currency? Just like we saw in all these old movies with these spacefaring, communities, or they have this type of money that you can use anywhere in any bar in the galaxy, And so it's whoa, it's kind of weird. It's like we're seeing the beginning of Star Wars or Star Trek, or, or or one of these movies, how we go from just being a one planet culture to multi-planet, multi-dimensional culture. And what it takes for that to happen, it takes for our consciousness to raise, it takes for our way of doing trade and monetization to start changing. It talks about our worldview expanding beyond just our planet. All that stuff is happening right now.
Totally, man. Yeah, and if there is anything to all of this Psi stuff, which at this point is so hard for me to deny, we're kind of unveiling the Force too. We're we're sort of it's indistinguishable from this notion of the Force, this mysterious interconnected thing that we're all tapped into, and some people have the gift to be able to tap into. You can train yourself to tap into it to some degree. It's super exciting. Just for, I know you have very limited time, but just for a fun way to wrap this, do you have any anecdotes that stand out to you as the most just mind-blowing thing that you've experienced or that you've seen firsthand with any of the exploration that you've done?
Yeah. So I went to Monroe. This is probably one of the biggest. When I was a kid, I had several psychic moments, precognitive moments, where one time I dreamt the lotto. I told my mom about it. She played it locally, but not nationally. The numbers came out nationally. We would have been bazillionaires. You and I probably wouldn't know each other, because I'd be on the beach somewhere hanging out. And there was several other instances that I've done some really amazing, things just came up and popped up in my mind. So there's that. But the gateway was probably one of the most concrete, very real things. I had an entity come to me while I was in that and tell me some things. And I left there and I was still trying to stay objective. So I was like, maybe that happened, maybe it didn't happen. Well, come to follow, I ended up partaking in several different classes after that. And there were these individuals in those classes that had psychic abilities or could tell you things about your life. And this person in one class tells me the same thing that entity told me, not knowing, because I didn't tell that story. And then I met another person a few weeks later who tells me the same thing that entity told me. So I'm not sure if I was precognitive, seeing what these people were and I just tacked on somewhere in my mind, my psyche, this entity, or if the entity was telling me about what I'm going to be in the future, and these people are confirming that, adding confirmation. Either way, that's pretty mind-blowing. It's pretty awakening. It did happen. It is real. So whether I'm precognating it or whether it was this actual entity, it was very real. And that happened after I was with my friend Chris Bledsoe for the first time, and he gave me an encounter with a UAP. And then a few days later, I went back and he facilitated another encounter with UAP. So the thing I would tell people anecdotally is that all of the systems that I practice, gateway, remote viewing, mind sight, seeing without your eyes, all this stuff, all hinders on your intention and attention. They all say the same thing. Focus your intention, maintain attention on that focus, right? And so if I was to tell people something, I'd say really get strong in those two things, right?
Yeah.
And then Joe McMoneagle says another one, which is a third one, which is expectation of outcome. Expect that it's going to have the outcome that you want it, right? Versus expecting that it's not, or kind of being in the middle. Set your intention. I want to communicate with this, or I want to do this, or whatever. To maintain your attention, and then expect that it's going to be exactly the way you intend it to be.
Yeah.
And then you will have probably some really good results in whatever field you're dabbling in or working in.
Wow. Man, I would love to hear the story about whatever you saw with Chris Bledsoe, but I know we're running very low on time. Can you give like the 30-second version?
Yeah. So the first time it was way up in the sky, and it was flashing, and it was moving back and forth and side to side and up and down. And and it was nighttime. So I was like, and I had just met Chris. So I was like, is this maybe it's a drone? But of course you can hear a drone, and it wasn't so far up that I couldn't hear it if it was a drone. So I was just like, I don't know. I'm just not sure,
Yeah.
And so I kind of left saying, okay. And one of the things he told me was, he said, hey, look, just be positive, just believe in the possibility that this could happen, and it'll happen. But if you come in here and you're like, I don't believe this stuff, this guy's crazy, blah, 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 it'll never happen, it's not real, then they're probably not going to show up. So he warned me about that, or gave me that advice ahead of time. And sure enough, the second time when I was there, it actually appeared in some trees ahead of me, which made me feel like it definitely wasn't a drone, because drones have a hard enough time flying between trees during the day. So at night, I felt that it was this glowing like orange orb, and in that same time frame, off to my right, another light pops up, and I'm like, Chris, is that one? I was really excited, and he said, no, that's my neighbor. They have a house back there. So either he was like the greatest psyoper ever, and he said all of the elements to make me believe it's a big illusion, or this was real. And so I walked away, not only with his friendship and loving him as a friend, but also knowing that what I saw, I couldn't explain. And if I was to explain it, I would say it was some sort of UAP. And that tells you. Now to finish off that story in a really great way, I'm sitting at Tom McNair's house, one of the remote viewers I told you about, and we're discussing. Chris comes up in conversation, and I'm like, he's like, oh yeah, I heard about him. I haven't read his book yet, but I'm really curious. Like, what was your take? Well, like what we're talking about now. So I explained these two stories, and he's like, so tell me more details. This guy is an ex CIA operative who was in the Army intelligence and all this stuff.
Yeah.
He was the head of all this really high level stuff in the CIA. So, he's all about details and gathering information. So he's like, tell me more. And I'm like, Tom, I just can't explain it in words. And right at that exact moment, Mike, my phone buzzes, right? And I pull it out of my pocket to see who's texting me. I look at it. It says Chris Bledsoe. I open it up, and it's a recording of him at that exact time, filming a UAP in his backyard. Hakim, look what came to see me today. Oh, it's this, that, and other. He was like, I just felt like I needed to send this to you. He's saying that. So either he had a microphone at Tom McNair's house, and they're now in cahoots playing this game on me, right?
Yeah.
Or there's something else going on. And I met him later and I told him, I said, dude, you sent me that video at just the right time. Why did you send that one to me? He was like, I don't know. I just felt like I needed to send it to you. And so I did. And I was like, well, here's what was going on. I was trying to explain to this dude what it looked like when I saw a UAP at your house. And right exactly as I was telling him I didn't have the words for it, you sent me that video. And he was like, and he looks, he smiles, he says, that's how the phenomenon works. Yeah. And I was like, okay. Okay.
Yeah, man. Wow. I love that. I wish we had more time. I could easily talk to you for another hour, no problem.
Well, we'll have to do it again then.
Let's do it. Yeah, so much more to ask you, man. But okay, thanks for doing this. I'm super stoked about everything you're doing in Psi Games. And yeah, let's talk again.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Welcome to the post Mind Meld Synchronistic Musings, my friends. Hope you enjoyed that one. However abbreviated, Hakim had really limited time. So anyway, the Synchronicity. As I'm recording this one, I forget to turn off my notifications. I see a text from my friend Bob pop on the screen. I don't see what it is. I just dismiss it. Of course, Hakim tells this particularly novel tale in a sea of novel tales in this one.
One of my mentors, Bill Ray. And Bill was one of the remote viewers too, and actually helped run the program for a little while as well. This guy said that he had several encounters where he bumped into these different types of entities. And one, he believes that the entity was angel or cherubim that was guarding the ark, because that's what he found out later he was supposed to be looking into.
About this remote viewer viewing the Ark of the Covenant as part of a remote viewing assignment. And what you may not know is there's a whole era in the Fort Meade Army remote viewing project where they are being told to attempt to remote view a number of anomalous things. I wish I could remember who was in charge of this. It wasn't the main person in charge. There was sort of a revolving door of people at a point in this project. It's really hard to keep track of. All these stories are in the great book Phenomena by Annie Jacobson. But anyway, there's one character who's just having all of these remote viewers attempt to view all sorts of anomalous things, underground UFO bases, things like the Ark of the Covenant. I decided it was worth actually dropping in here. The figure that was doing the anomalous targets was Ed Dames. He had remote viewers at Fort Meade not only look up the Ark of the Covenant, but things having to do with Atlantis, UFOs, crop circles. So fun stuff, but definitely controversial stuff. So anyway, Hakim tells this story, obviously, tells the name, says it was Bob Ray who did this remote viewing. I checked my text after we're done recording. I have this text from my friend Bob, and it is an article about this remote viewing of the Ark of the Covenant. It dropped on the exact same day that Hakim and I spoke. So naturally, I kind of thought like, oh, Hakim must have seen this article. So I messaged him and I'm like, man, this is wild. Did you know that this news story dropped? Is that why this was on your mind? And he said, no, I didn't find out till later either. And then we had a laugh about, he also told that story during the podcast to the effect of the thing Chris Bledsoe told him, I believe, about how, man, that's just how the phenomena works. And that was my first thought, is just like, God damn it. This is such a mind-blowing example of just something coming out of complete left field. I mean, this is a pretty woo story, even for me, this remote viewing of the Ark of the Covenant. So to have a synchronicity on something so novel just really blew my mind. Okay, so the remote viewing idea I had was, you may or may not be familiar with Zener cards. Designed by Carl Zener and made famous by the parapsychology trailblazer J.B. Rhine. The idea is that these are cards that you can use to test your ESP abilities. Essentially, they consist of 5 different shapes. You have a plus sign, a star, wavy lines, a circle, and a square. This, my friends, is one of the 5. I want you to attempt to calm yourself, to find it in your mind's eye. What is this shape out of the 5 that I just mentioned? Drop it in the comments. We will do a tabulation after a week or so, and we will see if the odds transcend chance. Keep your peepers peeled on the Third Eye Drops YouTube page if you want to see the result. I will make a post. It is going to stay right here on my desk. Take your time, focus in. Which of those 5 shapes is it? Again, remember, wavy lines, star, circle, square, or plus sign. Drop your answer in the comments, and I will give you the answer in a post later this week. All right, much love until then, my friends.